everyone, welcome to Moms Writers Club. I'm Jessica,
And I'm Sarah.
and today we have a very special guest to talk about R&Rs with us. This is Eden Campbell. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Eden. I write romance, and I'm also a poet. That's
We're
about it for
excited to have
me.
you here today.
Thank you.
We are going to talk about revise and resubmits, or R&Rs, and I would love to start us off if you could just give our audience kind of an explanation of what an R&R is.
Yes. So an R&R stands for Revise and Resubmit. Basically, it's when an agent likes your premise of your book and maybe even likes the way it starts or the way it ends, but they have a couple issues that they think I can't represent this book unless, A, B, and Z change. So that's when R&R is.
Got it. So I understand that you've gotten 3 R&Rs from different agents, and
Yes.
I would love it if you could tell us kind of a little bit about your querying journey and what led you to that.
Yeah, I would love to share. So my querying journey started with PitMad. I did not participate in the first 2 that I observed, but I just loved it. And I knew like, this is how my querying journey is going to begin. And so I did not query any other agents until the March PitMad came up. I had a great day, had agent interest, and right away I started sending out the queries. I think I had 5 agents, which is really great for PitMad.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. And, Jess helped me with my query because I was definitely a newbie. I just threw my querying package together literally in 2 days in order to make this work. And so leading up to PitMad, I had 15 people read my book. I mean, I just went crazy looking for people to give me feedback because I had a little inkling like, oh, there's something off, but I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I received great feedback. And it was like every time somebody wrote me and were like, yep, this book's going to be published, it just kind of inflamed my pride a little bit. I was like, oh, I'm doing so good here. And then one critique partner in particular wrote me and said, I'm really concerned about your first several chapters. She said, they start very slow. You don't have a hook. Really, your book begins in the 3rd chapter. And it was like a gut punch because I was expecting, her feedback to be good like everyone else's. And then after that, I hired an editor from Fiverr, and I did not pay for a full edit. It was only for the first 3 chapters. She didn't give me a lot of feedback. She was like, pretty good here. She just moved some things around a little bit. I hired an editor from Twitter just to do the first 6 chapters because I couldn't afford a full edit, but I wanted to be ready for PitMad. And I had it in the back of my head, like, oh, somebody doesn't like my first chapters. It's going to drive me insane if I don't have validation. Like, that's really what I was looking for, is like somebody tell me that it's going to be okay. And I had that from several editors. Like, they gave me input, but they were also, nobody told me that the hook wasn't there. And so what happened is when I received the likes on PitMad, I excitedly sent my, queries into the world, and I immediately got 2 R&Rs in the first week.
That's fast.
Yes,
Good.
yes,
Like, that's
in
a
the
really
first
good
week. And then the next week, I heard from another agent, and what happened is I'd written her and I said, I've received 2 R&Rs. What do you want me to do? And she said, when you're finished with the R&R, go ahead and send it my way. And so she didn't give me any information of what she was looking for, but she said, when you finish revising, I want this in my inbox, basically.
Yeah, cool.
Great.
So,
what I sort of hear you saying is that you kind of knew on some gut level that one critique partner was right.
yes.
But you were just so nourished by all that good
Yes.
feedback, because it's hard to write a book. It's really hard to write a book.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
but it's hard too, because if you have 20 people read your book, you're going to have 20 different opinions.
Yes.
And I had agents on my book tell me that they didn't feel like they felt like there were big issues with it. But then, obviously I got an offer on it.
Yeah. Well, I always say now that I've given my book to so many people to read, like, a critique partner that is honest is worth their weight in gold. Like the ones that will walk up to you and say, your first chapter has to be completely omitted. Like, that's really hard to hear, but it's also really hard to say. Like, I can say that as a beta reader, it's really hard to go to somebody and be like, eek, your first chapter is not working. Your last chapter, not working, but in the end, I have found those honest critiques to help me more as a writer than people are just like, good first chapter, and now I've learned to appreciate the process of dismantling the first chapter, because the first chapter is really hard to get.
It is.
So
I'm working
I think
on
I
one
always
right now.
rewrite my first chapter
Yes.
every single time.
Yes, and I've rewritten mine multiple times at this point. So I would love to share what was in my R&R.
Yeah,
If
that'd
you
be
guys
great.
are ready for that.
I think
know there
people are-
was.
What is that noise?
That's my dog. The kids are
This is
quiet, but it's
the
not.
Moms
It's not
Writers
the
Club
kids.
moment.
This is Moms Writers Club. Yeah, I mean, this is how we roll.
So this was an interesting PitMad interested agent because she came after PitMad. So like 3 days later, she commented on it and was like, hey, do you want to send this to me? And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And so she said, good morning. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to read Susie Smiles. Based on your synopsis, I think you have a good story and your writing is good. Here's the issue. You fail to hook your audience. I'm not sure at what page she actually encounters someone and exchanges dialogue, but I do know it takes too long to get there. You should never start your story with backstory and setup. You must hook your writers immediately. In your first few pages, nothing happens. So this was not even the blunt. This is this is like the gentle R&R. Just so you know.
Oh my
gosh, this is a nice R&R. Yeah. So it's important to immerse your readers in a world and let them experience it as the plot unfolds. Start where the story starts, and it's not this chapter. And then she went on to say, I implore you to work on the hook of your story. Remember, start the story where the story starts. At this point, I'm going to pass, but if you do a major revision, I'm happy to look at it again. And so as a newbie, I was like, wrote her back immediately. And I said, hey, I had a critique partner once upon a time tell me that my book starts in the 3rd chapter. What do you say? Like, do you want to read it? And she said, yes, send me the 3rd chapter. And so I sent her the 3rd chapter, just put it into the world. Here you go. And I was like riding high on, you know, the rush of getting feedback from an agent.
Yeah.
And that same day she wrote me and she said, this is what I'm looking for. I want the full.
Wow, that was so brave of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very scary. And like I said, I didn't know the rules, but I just took a risk. I said, I'm just going to send this out. And so when I did that, I wrote another agent that had liked my pitch during PetMad. And I said, hey, another agent, you know, requested that I start my book in the 3rd chapter. I've revised it to start in the 3rd chapter. Would you like the 3rd chapter? And she wrote back, said, yes, send me the 3rd chapter. So I did that. And then I have her R&R, which you're going to see. This is like a dagger kind of letter.
The second agent, what did she have already?
She had my query letter, my synopsis, and then she had 2 chapters, which at that point were not even in my book anymore. Like they were just gone, you know.
Right.
I took those 2 chapters and I just, you know, put them in the trash bin, and I was like, here we go, you know.
So this letter you're about to share with us came when she read your 3rd chapter.
When she read the 3rd chapter.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she said, Dear Eden, thank you for sending the revised version of When Susie Smiles. I'm glad you cut the first 2 chapters, as some of my initial feedback was that 100,000 words for a debut author is a bit of a stretch. My sweet spot is around 75,000. Your query is solid. You have a beautiful idea with a lot of heart. My main issue with the story is that Susie is not very likable. Susie is the main character. Her actions and motivations are hard to justify. In most contemporary romance, it's the male character that is toxic. So having her be toxic is an interesting twist, but she never has a moment where the reader is invested in her despite making choices we don't agree with. It's called a save the cat moment, and you don't have one. I think part of the lack of compassion for her character might be the point of view you chose to write in. With your particular writing style, 3rd person creates too much distance between the main character and the reader. I was very aware of the narrator throughout the sample pages. I enjoy your writing. Some of the descriptions are eloquent, but the voice is stiff and unrelatable. There's too much telling and not enough showing, and it causes major pacing issues. If you change the POV to 1st person, you might be able to resolve these issues. It really is a great idea, but the execution is rough. If the manuscript undergoes a revision, I would like to see it again. So that was my second R&R, which she followed up with a second email, which I feel like never happens. Like this agent wrote me back like within hours. She said, I don't want to discourage you from the querying process, but even if you only take some of the feedback under consideration, I still want to see this manuscript again. And she gave me her personal email address and said, please send this to my personal inbox, not to the agency.
That's really
and so for me, that was amazing. That was like, yeah, I thought she wants this manuscript, but I have to fix it, you know?
It seems like, so that was like some really harsh feedback, but also like clearly the agents who gave you feedback thought a lot about it and thought pretty highly of you in your book as well. Like, you know, to have those issues, but also see so much promise in it.
Yeah. And I took that as an encouragement. I knew that I had an original idea. But I didn't get the hook, you know, I didn't get the hook right, which as a debut author, like I said, I'd have dozens of people read my book, but I think they probably just pushed through. And then I kind of got a grasp on the story, and I found my voice, and, you know, and I think they probably pushed through and they maybe forgot that the 1st chapter was not that great. I don't know.
We were talking earlier about readers being different than writers. I think readers don't always recognize what the problem is. Like they might even feel it a little bit.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily recognize it unless they're, you know, very well read.
I feel like the agents, like when they both mentioned my narrator voice being kind of distant and doing more telling than showing. Like I said, those were things that my one critique partner, that really came down hard on me. I'm like, those were things that she addressed that I was like, nobody else mentioned. And I think it's
Right.
funny because in the writing world, they'll tell you when you get criticism, to go with your gut. Like, what does your gut say? And I feel like my gut, as somebody holding my book baby, was like, they're wrong. And I was like, my book's perfect. But once I heard agent feedback, I was like, oh, like I really need to go to this really hard place and
Mm.
fix the issues.
Well, I would say, first of all, keep that critique partner forever. And also, this is your
Yes.
first book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is incredible that you got this with your first book, but also I think everybody kind of doesn't quite understand the hook on their first book. It took me 3 to get it. You're doing great.
Me
Oh,
too.
thank you.
Another thing that I was thinking as you were talking about that is that, and it's this thing that's sort of dawning on me as we get further through this process, is that agents, like from the writers end, we think it's all about the book. And I'm realizing, I think for a lot of agents, it's also about the writer. You
Yeah.
know, and what I'm hearing from your story is like there were these two agents who really liked you as a writer.
Yeah.
They were like, you have a great idea, you have, good language. Like there's something about this woman that like made us want to email her and read her book, and they liked it
Yeah.
enough that they want you to try again. And they have enough faith in kind of you as a writer based on what
Yeah.
they've seen to think, oh, maybe she can do it,
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging. I mean, that's super encouraging. I think one thing I've wrestled with as a newbie author, things I didn't understand is how important the marketability of a book is. And so, an agent can like my writing and like my premise, but if it's not marketable for my genre,
Right.
then I don't stand a chance. And so, and honestly, that's where most of my rejections have revolved around in the last couple of
Mhm.
weeks. I know one of the questions you sent me, I'm jumping ahead, but it was about
Go
like
for it.
to revise whatever the agent asked for specifically.
Yeah, I'll say
And that was one.
specifically what she said
Yes.
was,
Yeah, go for it.
she said, be sure to revise specific issues the agent or editor points out. If you ignore my advice on an R&R, I'm not confident in your willingness or ability to work with me on a full manuscript. Like actually
Yes,
do
that
the
was it.
thing that the
Hmm.
agent's asking you to do if you're going to do it.
Yes. Yeah. So
I
I
so
like that. Go ahead.
I like that too, and I'm glad she brought that up because and she actually had a follow-up message where she was like, "But I also want the author to believe in the changes," and I think
Mm.
that is really important. So one of the
Yes.
things we wanted to do with this episode is talk about just because you are offered an R&R doesn't mean that you have to do it or that you even should do it.
Yeah.
And one example I will give is on my first book, I was offered an R&R on the first few chapters, but the agent wanted me to increase the romance, and it wasn't a romance. Like the book was not
Yeah.
a romance, and I didn't see it as a romance, so I didn't
Yeah.
agree with those changes. So one thing to keep in mind, just to the anybody watching this, is make
Yeah.
sure that you agree and believe in, and have even maybe talked through with the agent asking for an R&R, what those changes are, and that they feel right to you for your book. Which it sounds like these suggestions all did resound with you quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. I love what you said. That's totally true because gosh, I just heard about a writer on the writing community that, to publish, they told her to change like her whole book, and she did, and she submitted it and they didn't accept it. And that is a reality, is even if you do the R&R, if it's super extensive, you have to live with the fact that you've done all this work and it still might not be accepted.
Yeah.
And so I felt like with mine, the criticisms rang true. There were things that I'd already wrestled with, but I didn't know how to put words to. So it kind of put words to what I didn't know. And actually, after I revised the first couple of chapters, I like went back to one of the agents and sent them my stuff again. And I've done that probably 3 times now, gone back to agents, been like, I revised this, here's the revisions. I revised this again, here's the revisions. I mean, I'm pretty sure people tell you not to do that, but I'm like, I want them to have the best version of what I've written. And every time I make sure to tell them, like, I'm committed to getting this book right. That's what I put in the little
Mm.
letter where I'm like, I'm sorry to bother you, but I am going to keep working on this book until I get it right. And so here it is again, and they haven't rejected me. So
I think that points to another thing about when you undertake an R&R, like you were saying, there's no guarantee that the agent that asks for it is then going to offer you representation. Um,
yes.
it's not a promise. So if you make those changes, it's like you've got to be creating a work that then you want to submit to other agents. Like
Yeah.
if you come out of the R&R with a better book that you are even more psyched to continue querying, then it's a win-win.
So a lot of people asked about timeline for R&Rs, and I know like what I've heard from different agents and authors, but I'd love to hear if anybody talked about timeline with you or what your goals were, and then we can discuss a little more about the broader experience for other authors.
Sure. So for me, I was not given a timeline, but in my head, I thought I want to get this done as soon as possible because I don't want them to forget my manuscript. And so my goal was a month. And so what happened after I, did my first revision, sent the agent my third chapter, sent her my full, she came back, said, listen, you did not develop this enough. Like I just sent her my third chapter. I didn't like edit, I didn't add much in. And she was like, now you're throwing these characters together. I don't know what's happening. And she's like, mystery is good, but if you don't understand what's happening, somebody's gonna put your book down. And so she said, if you fix again, so it's kind of like a second R&R, like on the whole book. She was like, if you fix plot, if you fix pacing, if you fix character development, if you fix all these things, I want to see your manuscript again. And so after that, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to hire an editor. And so that's what I did is after that point, I hired a developmental editor. And when I was shopping around, I specifically looked for somebody that could get it done in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like I needed somebody with a really, short turnaround. And so that's what I did. She finished it in 2 weeks. Gave it back to me. I did my edits in like 3 weeks, and I literally went on a trip because I thought, oh, my kids, I'm not going to get it done. And so I went on like a 5-day trip to my parents' house and just like locked myself in the bedroom. Ended up getting a stomach bug, but it was like great because I just was in the room. I was like, I'm not eating. I'm just going to like knock this out. And so that's what I did. And so it was on that trip. It was about a month after I'd received my last R&R that I resent her my manuscripts, and I haven't heard back yet. Yeah.
I've always heard to take at least a month on bigger R&Rs. So the agent doesn't think you rush through it. But to answer like the broader question, the advice is to usually take at least a month. And I've always heard that agents want it to be good, and they would rather you take a little longer and make sure, that it's ready to go when you get it back to them. So taking as long as 2 or 3 months is totally appropriate. So we talked a little bit about reasons agents might ask for an R&R. I've always heard it's if they think that there's a lot of promise there, but there's a little bit of something that needs to change before they feel like they can sign.
It's like something they're just not quite willing to let go of.
Yeah.
Which is really encouraging. No guarantee, of course, but like, you can take it as a sign that this was good enough, that somebody wasn't willing to just like say, I wish you the best in your journey and send you on your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how about the exclusive R&R?
Okay, so an exclusive R&R is when an agent requests an R&R, but they don't want anybody else to see it. So you can't send what you revise to other agents. And so it's kind of like their critiques they want you to do for them and nobody else.
I've always heard that that the recommendation is that the author, if you want to do it, if you agree with it, that you put a time limit on it. So, they are giving you their feedback and they want kind of like first dibs on it, which makes sense if they're spending a lot of time, but you get it for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then you can go out. So because they're putting a lot of work in.
Maybe it depends on the amount of work, and I agree with you. The other thing I read that I never considered is the agent was saying, this is just a blog that an agent had, but she was saying it's very slimy if you accept R&Rs and then send it out to other agents, and then go with them based on the other agents' recommendations and critiques. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is when an agent, if they expect that, should ask for like a time limited exclusive R&R, like, give me 2 weeks of lead time or something like that.
Yeah. Or that seems really fair.
If they really love you that much, like maybe they should sign you.
Yeah.
I can see.
Yeah.
I do think that you have the right to send it to someone else because it's still your book and you're doing all that work. Yeah. But I also can understand them wanting a little bit of a
time. Yeah.
That's a hard question.
Right of first refusal. I'm also, I think that if an agent wants an exclusive R&R, I would also kind of feel like it's their job to give you some pretty extensive feedback. If the agent is just like, you don't have a hook and your last chapter is not good, and I think you should change the point of view, and I want an exclusive R&R, then it's all on you to figure out how to do it. And that's a very different picture to me than if an agent gives you really specific kind of developmental feedback that's actionable, that you agree with, that and then says, in return for all this great feedback I just gave you,
Yeah.
I want, a 30-day exclusive read of your
And
manuscript. And I want the
and
chance
I,
to offer.
yeah, and I would say it should be on that version. Someone else asked if you should pull back your fulls if you get an R&R, and I would argue no. An agent might fall in love with the other version of your book, and you
Yeah.
really, I mean, you shouldn't, in my opinion, limit your options that much.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I've wrestled with that because my book has changed so many times. And I would say even now, my book is, I won't say vastly different, but I would say at least 4 subplots are completely different.
Okay, so Kirsten asked, how about signs of when to undertake an R&R when there's not yet been an offer of representation versus signs that it might be better to pass on that R&R?
Okay, so I think what Kirsten is asking is, well, when to do it versus when not to. And I would say if the agent is expecting you to write it in a different genre or something that you don't agree with, that would be a reason to potentially pass on it. Or if you don't agree with their feedback, if you feel as though they don't understand what you are trying to do with your book, and it's maybe even something you've discussed and maybe, can't kind of come to agreement on. Like for me, when I signed with my agent, one of the things I loved so much was that I agreed with her vision for my book and that I felt like we could work collaboratively. So if you were talking to an agent about an R&R and you're like, I'm not quite jiving with this, that is potentially a sign that it's better to pass. Eden, do you have thoughts?
No, I totally agree with you. And I felt like what she was saying almost goes back to the statistics, like you're still not guaranteed representation. So I thought what she was saying is like, should I do the R&R even if I haven't been offered representation? And I don't, like, in my experience, representation, comes after, if it does come.
Yes.
You don't usually know ahead of time that you're going to be represented if you do it. So
Yeah. And I
Although
will say, go ahead.
I was going to say that one of my offers was, we had a long talk on the phone. We had the call, we had a great long call, and we talked about, her editorial thoughts. And one of her thoughts was, I really think you should change the ending. And she described to me why and in what way, and we talked that over. And I felt good about it. I didn't wind up going with her, but I did, like, I would have made those changes and been happy with the book. It didn't substantively change the story. It just, anyway, but she basically made, and this I think happens a lot. She basically offered me representation saying, if you agree to basically the things we talked about on the phone,
okay,
then I'm super excited to blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
So it wasn't exactly like an R&R offer of rep, but it was clear that, like, we've talked about this, I want to represent you, but here's what's in store.
But I think that's just, I think that's just an agent being honest with the direction they want to go. That's the same, very similar to the call I had. I want to offer you representation, and here are the changes I think that we would need to work on together. How do you feel about it? And making sure that you mesh well together and that you share a vision.
I guess the point being, like, it's like changes upon changes upon changes upon changes, like multiple iterations of what you're going through right now. It's like you're going to get represented, and then your agent you're going to go through another round of revisions before you go on submission, and then you sell your book, and then your editor puts you through a bunch of more rounds of revisions. And it's
you're
like
going excited about it because you love revisions, and I'm like, oh, more revisions.
I know, but and like, as debut authors, we're all just figuring this out, and we do have that moment where we're like, my perfect book, baby, it's like, it's so perfect, I finished it, the end, and then the agent's like, well, this is great, but
I think both of your stories are so encouraging, though, because I think in my mind, I'm like, if I don't have every detail perfect, the way the agent envisions it, I'm not going to get an offer of representation. But the truth is, like, for both of you, the agent loved your story, but they're like, let's just tweak this little thing, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I can do that. I'm willing to change things in my book to make it marketable or, make it so the agent likes it more. Like, I'm willing to do those things. So,
well, and I think that's typical. I think most writers do make changes to their book after they sign. I think it's the, very few who have a perfect book. Okay, so Stacy asked, is it better to be under the R&R time limit that has been set? And we kind of talked about this. I would say no. I think take the amount of time it takes, get it right. And if you need more time, ask for more time. Don't rush it.
Yeah, I think as authors, we go into this process feeling like we want it to happen really fast, and
Yeah.
whereas like it just slows down the further you go, like
It
That's what
really
I've
for
heard.
an
does.
agent it takes a while, and then going on sub takes a while, and then like
Yeah.
actually coming out with your book takes like 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you because like if you've gotten this much with this book, like first of all, I really hope that one of these people signs you, but if they don't, like I would be fairly certain you will get signed with your next book because like just that you've gotten this much attention this quickly and then they're going to remember your name and like you've learned so much from this book. Like I think you're getting closer like with every
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm on my second book now and I'm like 30,000 words in. And after reading Save the Cat and reading Story Genius, I feel like the words just like flow out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier
it's so different. Like
than,
and it just gets
yeah,
better and better.
than
Anyway.
5 years ago, sitting down and being like, I think I'll write a book, and not, yes, and not doing any research, not knowing my genre, not knowing anything. So yeah, like that is this book, like that I just put into the world. And I had a very, like, it just happened to be a decent story, but I think I did miss a lot of the traditional romance beats and just
I think that's
is a
everybody's
mess.
first book though. We all do it.
Yeah.
We have questions from Jamila. Jamila asked, what do you do when you receive conflicting feedback from editors? So I'm not sure if this is really specific to
Okay.
an R&R,
Yeah.
but I suppose it could be if you got multiple ones that had different opinions.
Yeah. So for me, I felt like both my R&Rs were pretty congruent in their feedback. They both said no hook. They both said I don't feel connected to the main character, those kind of things. But one thing I've always heard in writing is like, or in getting feedback on your writing, is to look for themes, and like if I would have done that, honestly, I would have seen great, 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 and then like two, I don't like this, I don't like this, and now I feel like with good feedback, I kind of put it into themes. I'm like, okay, these are what people like, but then I also do that for the negative feedback. I'm like the negative,
Yeah.
even if it's less, it matters and it counts. And that is what I found to be true is the negative feedback I got. If I would have told myself, well, I'm not getting very much of it, so it must not matter. I'm not getting as much of it. Actually, like when I got my R&Rs, it was very consistent with the negative feedback I had received. And so I think it's important to definitely pay attention to those things.
On my first book that I queried,
Uh-huh.
I got a reasonable response rate,
Mhm.
and I kept getting the same feedback.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that was like a really great early lesson to me. They would say it in different ways, but it was absolutely the same thing. And I feel like when you get multiple people giving you feedback, like A, awesome, that's super lucky that you're getting that
Mhm.
back from
Yeah.
agents. And B, look at it, because if it's like all over the map, then it may just be kind of subjective
Mhm.
preference.
Yep.
But if it
No.
is like grouped in themes, like you're saying, then yeah, really pay attention.
So far as the conflicting feedback, sometimes you have to think about what your vision for your book is too.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, what do you feel is maybe more right for your book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
That same person had a couple other questions.
Okay.
What do you do when feedback is vague and you don't know what would improve it? For an R&R, I would suggest maybe asking for clarification if you feel comfortable doing so.
Mhm.
What do you guys think?
Definitely.
And then even having someone else read it with the agent's remarks in mind,
Oh, yeah, that's a
which is
great
something
idea.
that I did, when I was like squirming beneath the weight of the, your voice is stiff and unrelatable and like those really heavy words, I sent my first, 3 chapters to somebody I trusted on Twitter and I said, hey, is this stiff and unrelatable? What do you think? And they did a great job of breaking it down for me. I'm like, listen, it's not starting in the action. Listen, you did tell here, like, and so it really helped me see what needed to be changed. But I just think it's really important to understand the marketability of a book. And just because a book is well written doesn't mean it's marketable. And I think, I don't know if you could tie that into an R&R, but like I said, I feel like that's been most of my feedback thus far from agents is that like I don't want to say lack of marketability because that sounds really harsh, but yeah, like I don't think that we can represent this because A, B, and C. So I think as a debut author, I just wish I would have known that. I wish I would have known to pay attention to the marketability of a book.
What have you done to understand that better since getting that feedback? Like what advice would you have?
I have researched, just even Googled romance genre, women's fiction genre, because that's what I did is I wrote a hybrid women's fiction romance, but I put a male POV, so I couldn't make it women's fiction, which I didn't understand that before, because I thought it was perfect women's fiction. But because I have a male POV, I actually have to make it romance. And so that just complicated things, because then I had to add romance beats in. And so studying romance beats, definitely reading romance. And then, reading Save the Cat and Story Genius, which I did more for the book I'm writing now, but it really helped me go back and see like, okay, I didn't do this great in the other book. And then sometimes it was like, oh, I did this great without even knowing. So that's awesome.
That's always fun.
Yeah. So that was encouraging, but there's still a lot of work to do. And there's that unlikable thing. I've heard that multiple times now. I've heard that.
I want to read your
3 times.
book because I have a very prickly, snarky, slightly controversial main character. And I coped with that too. So
yeah, really, it's very, it's hard to know. And so I felt like what I did to help people stay close to her is make sure they understood the trauma that she had endured. Like, I want to, like, here's, she's been traumatized. Here's her very bad behavior. But it's like, the more I layer the trauma, then, the last reader was like, I don't believe her trauma. Like, it's too big. Like, she was like, I'm traumatized. I've never done that, and so.
I had a really good developmental editor early on who kind of addressed that for me. And her solution for it was like, really let us inside this character's head. Like, let us kind of feel what she's feeling. If she's acting really prickly and defensive, like, let us feel that she's feeling frightened.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, I get it. Like, I can relate to a frightened person.
Yes.
Now. And so, like, if you've got also an issue of like too much narrative distance, like I was in first person present, like I was right up in her head. So it was not hard to do.
Yes.
But that was really helpful. So I want to ask one last thing, which is, what is your like favorite go-to piece of advice for other moms who are trying to survive and thrive as writers?
For me, I just write when the creative energy hits me, and like, I have a really hard time writing from discipline. So I know lots of moms that get up early and write. I'm like, that's great. I have a very hard time doing that. But like, when I have inspiration, I can, knock out a chapter in a couple hours. Like, I can just go for it. And so that is my experience. And so if that creative energy happens in the middle of the day when I'm supposed to be doing laundry or like keeping children alive, I will put the television on and I'll write. And what I found is that it evens out. It's not because I don't do it every day, but like, I am very sensitive to that creative spark, to that moment where I'm making dinner and I have an idea. And if I can't sit down and write that moment, I will immediately record it. Like, I will get out my phone, I'll record everything I'm thinking. I will like make facial expressions and be like, why are you leaving? Like, come back, like I will hear the voices in my head. And just so I capture that emotion. And then what I'll do is when my kids go to bed, I'll play my recording. And sometimes it works. Sometimes that creative energy like flows back into me and I'm like, I can do this. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm too tired, I can't do it. If the creative energy hits me, I will do anything I can to sit down and write. And I find that helps me be more productive. And then when I go back and read my writing, it just like, I sense that creative energy on the page, it kind of jumps out at me. And so, and I can tell when I write tired, like I can tell when I'm tired and I can tell when I'm like loving it. And so I just really try to prioritize the times when I'm just going for it and the words are flowing easy and the inspiration's there.
And just improvise with the kids.
Yes. It's lots of improvising and, and communicating with them. Like, mommy has a dream, mommy's a writer, and telling them all what's happening at PitMat and just like really bringing them into the process so they know that this is something I love. And so, they've gotten really great at, when that creative energy happens, they get their creative thing. They do Play-Doh. My son is a writer. He's an amazing writer. So he'll sit down with paper and pen and, we just all kind of break out into creative time and make it happen.
Oh, I love that.
Eden, where can people find you online? You have a great online presence and are a fun person to follow.
I'm on Twitter at author Eden C. And I love Twitter. That's probably my favorite platform to interact with other writers. And I'm also on TikTok, and it's also at author Eden C. Same on Instagram. On TikTok, I like to share about pretty much all the mistakes that I've made as a writer, so you can learn from my mistakes. I'm the type of person I have to learn everything the hard way, and then I don't forget it. So I do share on TikTok from time to time, and I'm trying to do Instagram. I'm not as savvy there, but Twitter for sure is like my place.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. I think people have learned a lot about R&Rs.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's such an honor. I love you guys, and I've just learned so much from being in the Writers Moms Club, and this is a great YouTube channel.
So good luck with your R&Rs and keep us
Yeah.
posted.
And
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited
will.
for you.
Can't wait to hear what happens.
Thank you so much.
All right, that's all we got this week.
See everyone next time. Find us on Twitter, #MomsWritersClub.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice.